Would you like to play? Come on. It's easy. 52 cards, neatly arranged by suit and rank. Alone, their value is little more than the number or face with which each is stamped. But let them dance on green felt. Let them be touched by hands that know how to coax the connections, by a mind that can choreograph perfection from the devilish swirl of infinite possibility. And suddenly, 52 separate soldiers become an unforgiving army of kings and queens, deuces and jacks, aces and nines. Then their value is measured in treasure, in hopes and hardship, in wasted lives, in broken men. Come on. It's easy. Let's play.
In his craft, nobody was quicker, nobody was smarter, and nobody was better. He thought quick on his feet. He was light years ahead of the other players, and people feared him.
He was someone who would like to stick it in your liver, as we say, in the racket.
At the poker table, he was one of the most obnoxious people I've ever known. I almost got in 2 or 3 fights with him.
He hissed. It's almost like he needed an exorcist. He had this deep down anger.
Away from gambling, he was totally a different person.
He was the most gentle, caring. He just had the biggest heart.
He was generous to a fault.
Money just sifted through his fingertips just like sand through a timer.
He would come in the house with rubber bands around $100 bills, and there'd probably be 20,000 in each, or 10,000, 10,000.
He would supply the cocaine. At one time, he'd brought in a huge rock the size of like a bowling ball.
I was talking to him about the drugs. He said, I like what drugs do for me.
You'd see him sometimes where he'd been up all night, his eyes are red and circles, and there's blood coming out of his nose.
He just did things in a huge, huge way, whatever it was. Playing, snorting, nobody could keep up with him.
The Mondale pine is a remarkable tree. Tall, sturdy, strong. It somehow pulls life from dry desert soil. Ironic that a man who was small of stature and who struggled with personal weakness should find peace beneath a Mondale's sheltering boughs. This is Palm Cemetery, Las Vegas, Nevada. A simple stone marks the final resting place of the man most considered the greatest poker player who ever lived, Stu Ungar.
I don't think I'm gonna reach 65. Because I wear and tear myself. You know, what I do is only bad to myself. I'm very good to other people, you know what I mean? I believe in heaven and hell, and I'm very scared of being damned. I pray, yeah, but it seems I only really praise when I almost feel like I'm dying, you know what I mean?
I don't think anybody is in his class. When you look at the number of major championships that this guy won in his career, it's mind-boggling. Back in the 80s, there were 2 events. There was Benion's World Series of Poker. There was Amarillo Slim Super Bowl of Poker. They all played them. Well, there's only one guy in the world who's ever won the main event at both the World Series and in the Super Bowl of poker, and that was Stu Ungar, and he won them 3 times each.
Only 45 when a cleaning lady found him dead in a cheap motel not far from the Vegas Strip.
Well, I'm amazed that he lived as long as he did, looking back on it now, as big a cocaine user as he was in his day.
Just 5'4", 110 pounds on a good day.
I don't think Stu Ungar ever felt insecure or intimidated in any way by his stature. This kid may have been 5'4", but to him he thought he was 7'1" and played center for the New York Knicks. In terms of intellectual stature, in terms of stature as a gin player, as a poker player, he was a giant, and Stewie knew it.
Ungar is the only person to win the World Series of Poker and the Super Bowl of Poker 3 times each. A bookmaker's son from New York's Lower East Side, he reveled in the wise guy image.
Stewie was younger than I was. There was this young kid who would come into the card game, and he would just destroy everyone in the game. There was one particular game we were playing draw poker. When it came to bet, Stewie turned to us and said, "Oh, you have 4 to a flush, you have 2 pairs, probably middle pair, something like 8s and 9s," and it was 100% right. It got to the point where you'd wonder, are the cards marked or is someone tipping him off? And they weren't.
Others say he was a gentle and generous soul, a good husband, a devoted dad.
He wanted family. Family meant so much to him. Maybe he didn't have it with his mom and his dad. That's where his softness came. Children.
The very last time that I saw my dad, I just said, "Dad, you know I love you, and I'm very proud of you as my dad, and I just want you to know that." And he was like, "Oh, honey," he goes, "that means so much to me." He goes, "because sometimes, you know, I've always thought I could have been a better dad to you, and just to hear you say that, you don't know how much that means to me." And that's the thing that I miss the most, is just those conversations and the way that we connected on that emotional level.
One thing that isn't argued is the fatal precision with which Ungar stalked the green felt of each and every card room he entered.
It wasn't Stewie's style in anything to just be passive. Most people that play poker know you have to throw away certain hands. Well, Stewie made a living by playing every hand. He just seemed to put more money in when he had the best hand.
Boy genius, the gambling savant, or just a troubled drug addict.
He was the face of poker, and even in death, he's still the face of poker. People constantly want to hear about him and talk about him.
Whether it was cards or cocaine, Stu Ungar attacked his canvas with the brutal madness of Van Gogh. And when his masterpiece was finally complete, he titled it with a simple question: who am I? Who was Stu Ungar, really?
Some people approached me. They said, "We got a young kid in town that likes to play gin rummy, and I understand you play gin rummy, and we'd like to set up a game." So I said, "Sure, I'll play." They bring in this little kid. This looked like he might have weighed 90 pounds. And he was so young, it was unbelievable. I mean, I couldn't believe that's the guy I was going to be playing. He was so small, we set the table up, and they put a Coca-Cola crate in his chair, and he had to sit on the Coca-Cola crate in order to be big enough to get up to the table. And naturally, he beat me out of 40,000. That was my first introduction to Stu Ungar.
When I came here in '73, it was a very small town. Good old boy network. Small group of people who basically ran the whole town. Everybody knew everybody.
Vegas in the 70s. Sin City was in transition. The Rat Pack no longer ruled the Strip, and the economic boom of the 80s had yet to begin.
Everything was cash. Cash or comps. Nobody that I knew of paid by check. Nobody that I knew of used credit cards. Everybody paid by cash. Everybody had cash.
The perfect place for someone whose only understanding of 9 to 5 is how it might bookend an inside straight. Stu Ungar rolled into town in 1974 and was immediately at home.
He looked like a baby. He had a baby face.
He was very hyper. If he's sitting at a table, he was bouncing his leg, moving with his hands, or talking and getting up and walking around. Wondered if he was old enough to be in the casino, and I thought to myself, this must be some rich kid. I didn't know that I was looking at the best gin rummy player that ever lived.
When I first moved here, he told me he had put away $1 million in a vault. And I'm like, playing blackjack. And I'm like, wow.
Eventually, Ungar was joined by his girlfriend, Madeline, and her young son, Richie.
He was naive to a lot of the worldly things. So, I went to go buy the home. I went to go buy the cars. I have to do everything.
Everything Madeline decorated their lives with was paid for in cash.
He thought you write a check and the check is good. He didn't realize you have to go in the bank, put the money in the bank, for it to be good.
Stuart Ungar, gin player. What do you think about Stuart? I think Stuart has what we call card sense.
So he shows up in 1980 and plays in this World Series of Poker. This was only the second poker tournament he had ever played in before. He had played 5 gin rummy tournaments up to that point and had won 3 out of the 5.
You got 2 3s. Show me anything you could have.
When he entered, it was kind of a lark, that it wasn't really serious. Out of a field of about 100 people, it made him 100 to 1.
Hello.
And I recall very, very vividly that an Irish bookmaker changed his line after watching Stewie and just watching him at the different tables. Made him 20 to 1, just based on watching the guy's demeanor. How confident he sounded.
But I was freaky. I was like Bobby Fischer. I was freaky what I did. People would teach me a card game that I never played, and 2 days later I'd be better than them. And a card game they were playing for 30 years. In terms of freak of nature.
Barely 26, and Stu Ungar was already a high roller. The confidence, the attitude, the ability, the qualities that became legend were born on the streets of New York's Lower East Side.
His father's name was Isidore Ungar. Isidore owned a bar on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. His father was a bookmaker, and Stewie's education, to a large extent, took place in the bar.
Bars were hangouts for legal and illicit things, too. Bars were where the wise guys hung out, and there was a local bookmaker and numbers runner, and it was just a place to hang out.
Often after school, Stewie would come to the bar, hang out in the bar, and be associated with a lot of the wise guys or people that were connected to organized crime. These essentially were Stu Ungar's mentors. Stewie, by the time he was 7 or 8, was actually doing some of the books for his dad, which is really a remarkable thing. Stewie ends up being, in a sense, the kid bookmaker of the joint.
His other teachers, the ones at school, noticed Ungar's uncanny ability with numbers as well. Some suggested he was a genius. He skipped 7th grade because of his intellect, and then quit school in 10th grade, in spite of it.
My father was one of the biggest book writers in New York. He was a millionaire when millions meant something. That thing is, my father hated when I gambled, you know. And I was very afraid of my father. I wasn't afraid of my mother.
His father was an older man, so he did not really have a close relationship with his father. He had more of a relationship with his mom.
After Isidore Ungar died, Stu Ungar's parents became a bunch of wise guys. And all he knew was going around and playing in card clubs and being protected by a lot of the people in organized crime.
The first time I met Stewie, I saw this young kid walk in with an entourage, and it seemed like he was controlling the conversation. I'd never seen a kid that young being around the gambling.
Those days he had a sweet innocence to him that disappeared along the way, let's say.
They've been playing 4 days. This is the final.
When Stu Ungar placed his first bet at the 1980 World Series of Poker, he was 26 years old, young by poker standards. But he was already an old soul at games of chance. He'd been gambling virtually every day for at least 16 years.
I played with him each day, and I never saw anybody that improved from day to day like he did in that tournament. And it came down just to he and I. We were the last two players.
What about the chips in your hand?
Dewey wants it all.
Dewey called.
He fooled me on a hand, won all my chips, and he was the champion, and I was the second place finisher.
Dewey wins the tournament with a 5-high string.
He was very happy, obviously.
It was Ungar's first World Series of Poker championship. He won $365,000.
That was the beginning of the Stu Ungar legend in the tournaments.
But even as that legend was being written, there was a dark chapter waiting to be told.
I was at Del Mar Racetrack with a couple of the poker players, including Stewie, and he is starting to bet with a guy known as the Flipper. And he has a hustle. He flips coins, and he bets you on the outcome. Stewie was going to get involved in this. He was willing to just think he was lucky enough to find a total stranger at the racetrack that flipped coins, wanted to throw his money away. That's how Stewie was.
Heads you win, tails you lose. Some people are born to live on the edge of that 50-50 blade. It was 1980. Stu Ungar had just won the World Series of Poker. He had a huge bankroll. His girlfriend Madeline and her son Richie had joined him. 2 years later, they were husband and wife.
Richie was the main ingredient that kept us together, and he adored him. They played baseball, they played basketball, and my son was so appreciative to anything he did, and he would introduce everybody. This is my dad. This is my dad.
But there was another side to this success story. Cocaine.
He turned to cocaine in order to fuel his ability to stay awake, to stay focused.
You know, there were a lot of guys out here doing cocaine at that time, you know, especially a lot of the top poker players, because it kept you up for an extra couple days. They'd play several day sessions, marathon sessions in those days. You know, Stewie was just right in there with them.
They were staying up 24 hours. He had no clue when somebody said to him, "Oh, this will keep you up." at first it was fun for him, and then right after that, it wasn't fun.
Fay Ungar's health was in serious decline throughout the 70s. Stu said he first tried cocaine because of that. His mother died in 1979.
I never took a drink or did anything. I was the straightest kid you ever seen. I went over some friends of mine house, and there was a vial of cocaine on the table. And I said, what is that? I've never seen it before. I'm trying to think of sometimes if that didn't happen, an incident with my mother, if I had got involved with it at that point in my life.
He didn't have control over himself because he got so involved in the drug scene. He couldn't handle adversity, and he would do things that he shouldn't do.
He was a person that would lash out at the dealers, or he just would say things to other players.
Stu just talked very bad to people. He'd call them names and just get right up in their face, and threaten them. He did a lot of things that disrespected the game. I remember that he spit on a card one time. His up card was the card that would have won him the pot before, and he started spitting on the card and told the dealer, said, "I'm out, dealer, I'm out."
He was so out of line, cursing at the dealer, almost spitting at her. She came standing next to me in her street clothes, and I said, "What happened?" She goes, "Oh, I just quit." I said, "What happened?" She goes, "I'm quitting because I'm going to kick his..."
The drug use may help explain Ungar's bizarre and often confrontational demeanor at the table. In spite of his cocaine use, Ungar proved that his 1980 championship was no fluke.
See down at the end of the table that young man in the blue jacket, blue shirt? He's a story right now. He's a defending champ. He's only 27 years old.
You had Doyle Brunson, Amarillo Slim, Bobby Baldwin. Great poker players, almost icons of the game, even at that time. And for Stu Ungar to win it once, a lot of people speculated, he got lucky.
Induce the club? Yeah.
And the queen does it. Queens and fours, a winning hand for Stu Ungar, and he repeats as the world champion of poker. And a child shall lead him. 27-year-old Stu Ungar has again won the world championship of poker 2 years in a row.
I just waited out. I had bad streaks in, and I tried to just hang on until I got one good streak and then play it out. I won $300,000 in about an hour when I was down to $30,000. That was it.
The $375,000 payday marked Ungar as the greatest poker player in the world. It also marked the beginning of his long downward spiral.
After he won the second World Series, it really went to his head.
Instead of paying that house off or getting an investment banker or whatever, no, it was, I'm going out gambling.
And then he went downhill. He went into a deep cavern in his life, caused mostly by drugs.
He had some bad beats like everybody encounters. He probably handled them better than most people I've ever seen. Bet $110,000 on a horse race, and the horses that he bet on were clear by probably 40 or 50 yards to the finish line, and the one horse broke its right front leg. It was a $110,000 loss. Within 20 minutes after that bad beat, he reappeared for the next race, and he simply said, "You see what happened, Jimmy?" I said, "Yes, Dewey." He said, "How much can I bet on race 8? In my 31 years behind the counter, I have never seen anything that equaled that, and that was Stu Ungar.
action. For a gambler, that word has clear and distinct meaning. It's the movement of money, from one bet to the next bet to the next, on and on without stop. It's a constant need to put something at risk. In this case, money. The more, the better. Stu Ungar loved action. He needed it.
And he did have an insatiable appetite for action. He was an action freak, as we say.
Stewie was a losing sports and horse player. If he had $80,000 in his account, say it's a Saturday morning with a bevy of college football games going on, he would never stop betting until he exercised the whole $80,000. He bet everything all the time.
One night, he came over to my house and he sees the pool table. Billy, let's play some pool. You play pool? You play pool? I said, well, Stu, you see the table? I said, but I haven't played in years. He says, we'll play 5,000 a game. We start playing, and he couldn't play at all. I was just knocking the balls all over the table, and he loses about 70, 80,000 playing pool before he quit. That was just Stewie. In other words, he would just give his money away so often.
He called me up one day. He said, Don, he said, you got to come over. He said, I just won $140,000 this week. He said, I got something for you. Went over to his apartment. Said, how you doing? He said, broke. He says, lost 140 and another 50 with it.
The problem with Stewie was he never really understood the object of the game in terms of being a professional gambler. You know, and the object, of course, is to increase your bankroll, improve your lifestyle, and provide for your family.
In 1982, family became a bigger focus in Ungar's life. He and Madeline were married that September. 2 months later, their daughter, Stephanie, was born.
When Stephanie was born, he was just blown away. I mean, he just thought she was everything. And my son Richie idolized everything about Stewie. He idolized what he became. Richie would have loved to have been a gambler. They just loved each other.
Those family bonds were tested by Ungar's endless need for action and cocaine.
Anytime he was around and there was drugs around, everyone knew he was the meal ticket. At times there was a $1,000 a day cocaine habit.
I can remember one time at the Dunes Hotel in Las Vegas, he was going up his room to get some. So I go up to the room. We walk in. The desk had a glass tabletop on it. And on the tabletop, all the way across the tabletop, it looked like somebody spilled a bag of salt or flour or something, you know. But I realized it was cocaine then. I thought, whoa, this guy's got a problem here.
He had snorted so much of it, put it up his nose, that it had eaten the membranes in his nose away, and his nose just collapsed.
He wore a pair of glasses to almost trick people into thinking his nose was different than what it was.
He said he was going to get his nose fixed, but unfortunately what he did was he did not take the proper healing time, and he had his nose collapse from indulging again into cocaine.
Turmoil and tragedy marked the rest of the decade. In 1986, Madeline filed for divorce. In 1989, he lost his son.
What happened was Richie didn't come home that evening. He had gone over to the Hilton Hotel. He took the cable, and I guess he decided that this was it. In the parking lot, he took his life. He hung himself.
I will not show any tears in public. I'll cry myself as I'm deceived by my son committing suicide. I never show any fear or anything, you know, in any circumstance, you know what I mean? If it was gone to the head, it was by my way.
My father always blamed himself for my brother's death. He just said that if he would have just known that that's what he was, that's how depressed he was, that's how upset he was, he would have handled things in a different way.
I mean, he was just not the same after that. And that really hurt him. Because he loved that boy.
After Richie passed away, I saw him, the use of drugs, even more. He didn't care how he looked. He didn't care how he ate. He just kind of became a recluse.
We bumped into each other at one of the hotels. And he pulled me aside. He said, "You look terrible. What's the matter with you?" I said, "I'm having some problems at home." He went into his pocket and he handed me $10,000 in $100 bills. He said, "You need some money? Here." He said, "Whenever you can pay me back, pay me back. And if you don't pay me back, I don't care." And he walked away. Now, how many people do you know will do that for you?
Stu Ungar's generosity is as much a part of Las Vegas lore as his card-playing ability.
I remember we were walking down the street one time, and this guy came up behind us, said, "Stewie," said, "I'm broke," said, "Can you help me out?" Stewie took a $100 bill and just handed it up behind him, and the guy took it and went away. I said, "Stewie, who was that?" He said, "I don't know." I said, "If I'd known his name, I'd have given him 200. And that's the kind of person he was.
Millions of dollars passed through his talented hands, and 2 World Series of Poker championships went into his trophy case. The only thing that matched his dramatic rise was his fall.
Just want to welcome everybody to the World Series of Poker. Shuffle up and deal.
By 1990, Stu Ungar was divorced, horribly addicted to cocaine, and haunted by his son's suicide. In a sense, Ungar brought as much negative baggage to the table as he did chips when he showed up at that year's World Series of Poker.
I staked him. It was a $10,000 buy-in. And at the end of the first day, he was running away with the tournament. Had a big lead. He had $70-something thousand worth of chips. So now they come back the second day, and I get a phone call from Eric Drake, who was the tournament director at the time.
I asked everyone, had they seen him, had they heard from him, and then I knew what room he was staying in. I asked security to go up there. I saw him laying on the bed, kind of like in a side of a seizure, like his whole body tensing up.
They hauled Stewie out of the Golden Nugget on a stretcher and put him in an ambulance. They took him to Sunrise Hospital.
He did drugs the night before, and he had some kind of adverse reaction to them.
Never showed up the second day. Didn't even finish the tournament.
You know, you're talking about an icon in the poker world who had just fallen to the lowest rung that you could fall on in the ladder. It was very sad to see.
Stu Ungar, who friends say always helped the down and out, was now one of the down and out himself.
Literally, he cried one day with me because he said, "Mike," he said, "I've gone through millions of dollars and I don't have any money to buy my daughter's school clothes."
I took my daughter to Galleria Mall the other day, and she started looking at price tags because I had took my money, and I said to myself, "What did I do? What am I doing?" I didn't know the most beautiful girl in the world. I mean, a gem, and she's got to look at price tags after the money that I went through my hands and I've given away, and just millions in drugs. You know, it's disgraceful. And I felt so bad for her. She said, "What are you worried about that? It's okay." It was so humiliating to me. It was a shame, you know, for her.
When he couldn't buy school clothes for his daughter when school was starting, that really got him. It got him.
given what he had become, what happened in 1997 is all the more amazing.
He came to me. He was dead broke, and he wanted me to bankroll him. And I turned him down. I said, "Stuart, please, leave me alone." And he assured me he was clean as a whistle. He was ready to play, blah, blah, blah. So finally, I just relented. I says, "Here, Stuart, you take this $10,000 and go put it in the tournament. And if I catch you out of that chair one time, I'm going to kill you."
You know, he came in that first day high as a cat. Well, I actually grabbed him and sort of shook him. I said, "Stu, you got to get through the day." I said, "You're going to be fine with a night's sleep and the rest of the tournament, but you got to make it through the day." And he hung on and made it through the day and just sailed right down to the final table.
This is it. Heads-up poker for hard cash between Stu the Kid Ungar and John Strimp.
Ungar wasn't alone on his journey to the championship table. In his pocket, next to his heart, was a picture of his daughter, Stephanie. He said that she was his inspiration.
Right before the final day started, we sat down, and he told me exactly what had been happening to him for the last 2 years, but he was certain he was going to turn things around, that he was going to win the tournament, and things were going to be different. He showed me the picture of Stephanie. He said, "You got to ask me. I want to show this picture when I win the tournament." He didn't even assume that there was anything that could happen for him not to win the tournament.
I was
Great. This could be it, ladies and gentlemen. He's winning $800,000.
He does have it.
John calls.
Yes.
Deuce. Stewie wins the tournament. Stu Ungar has won 3 World Series of poker. Incredible.
One of the greatest comebacks of any human being. Someone literally living in a homeless state, and all of a sudden the next moment he's a millionaire and a 3-time world poker champion.
You're older, you're wiser, you're 43 years old. You think you're going to do things differently now?
Well, I hope so, Gabe. You know, I've neglected my kids. You know, I've done a lot of stupid things myself. But I want to tell you something for a fact. There's nobody that ever beat me playing cards. The only one that ever beat me was myself. And I want my daughter's picture one more time. I love you, honey, and I'll be seeing you soon.
Stu Ungar was back, but for how long?
I used to go around the old racetrack 10 years old. Go to the window and bet $50 a horse. I used to have to give the money to strangers to make the bets with me. Naturally, if another person would gamble like me, they would call me a degenerate gambler. But when you're successful at it, you make your living at it, you go, well, you're not a degenerate no more. You know?
If Stu Ungar's life was guided by a Hollywood screenwriter's pen, there would be a happy ending. Perhaps he would parlay his redemption at the '97 World Series of Poker into a lifestyle befitting the only 3-time champion of that event.
I believed so much that this really was a turnaround, because he said to me, "You know, I'm clean." I said, "Great."
But Stu Ungar didn't live in Hollywood. He lived in Las Vegas. And he wasn't an actor. He was a professional gambler. The winner's share of the '97 World Series of Poker was $1 million. 4 months after he won it, Ungar was broke.
Like with much of the rest of the money in Stu Ungar's life that he earned, it ended up pretty much in the same places. In the sports books, at the tables, in the pockets of the drug dealers.
He said, "Sexton," he said, "remember this." He said, "Anybody can win a tournament." He said, "Defending, that's where it's at." So I know how important it was for Stewie to come back in 1998 to defend his title, you know, that he had won the previous year.
I actually put the money up for him to play in 1998. The day of the tournament, He was in such bad shape, he told me 5 minutes before the tournament started, he said, Billy, he says, I'm too tired to play. Here's a man that could come and play in a tournament. It's not going to cost him a penny. And he was unable to walk from upstairs to downstairs to play in a tournament that he had just won the year before. And that's when I knew that Stu Ungar was in really bad shape.
Over the course of the next few months, Ungar was arrested for possession of crack cocaine.
The last time I saw my dad, I told him, I said, I don't want to have anything to do with you anymore. I said, I don't want to answer, I'm not going to answer my phone unless you are in drug rehab. I just was trying to play the hard role.
Many of the high-stakes players, they all wanted to send him to rehab center, the nicest ones in the country. He didn't want to do it.
You can't help people that don't want to help themselves. I found that out through the years. And Stu didn't want to be helped.
On November 22nd, 1998, in this hotel, in a part of Vegas known for drug use and prostitution, Stu Ungar was found dead.
The great irony of Stu Ungar's location of death is the fact that all over Las Vegas for many years he had comp suites. He lived at Caesar's Palace for a time. He had credit lines of $1 million at the Dunes. He walked into most of these casinos throughout his life as royalty. To be there in that environment at the end of his life is really the great irony and the great tragedy.
I got a phone call from Don McNamee. He said, Madeline, you need to sit down. And then he told me. It was hard.
Somebody called me and said, the kid died. I said, okay, I mean, what are you going to do?
Everybody felt terrible, but it wasn't a surprise.
The coroner's report indicated traces of cocaine, methadone, and a prescription painkiller in Ungar's system. But under cause of death, the reason cited was a heart condition brought about by years of abuse.
I regret ever doing the tough love thing. It hurts me to think that he died thinking that his daughter didn't care about him and didn't want to have anything to do with him. I wanted to tell him, no, I do still love you. I still want you in my life. That's why I'm doing this, because I want you so much, you know? So...
In the gambling world, in the poker world, in the gin rummy world, he had talent like we'll never see again. But sadly, in the game of life, Stu Ungar was a loser. There's no question about it.
Stu Ungar's self-portrait is a complicated canvas, painted with equally balanced strokes of genius, pain, and self-abuse.
It angers everybody in the poker world that he didn't get control of his life. We'll never know exactly the extent of his talent. You know, no telling how good the guy might have been.
The expansion of poker now and the popularity and the people making all this money, I mean, who knows what this kid would have been worth today in this environment.
I just wish that he would have gotten through that era and gotten to this era, because he would have been, wow, he would have been amazing.
There's not a doubt in my mind, he would have been far and away the biggest superstar poker player that the world has ever seen.
On November 26, 1998, Stu Ungar was laid to rest. Friends and fellow gamblers paid for the ceremony.
It's a sad time for the poker world. Let's forgive Stu for his weaknesses and his drug problems and remember him for what he was. The greatest player to ever grace the green felt. Thank you.
Stu Ungar never held what most people would call a real job. That said, it's been estimated he earned nearly $30 million in his gambling career. At the time of his death, all he had left was the $800 investigators found in his pocket. He was 45 years old.